2023 was yet another year of international crises. Wars, coups, and territorial tensions dominated headlines. This week, Power and Politics is digging into 5 geopolitical flashpoints to watch in 2024. Our coverage will span 4 continents, 2 wars, and a pivotal election that could define the international order for the next 4 years. We're going to begin in the Middle East. The Israel-Hamas war, sparked by that brutal October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, is now in its 4th month. Israel's relentless military campaign in Gaza and the mounting death toll among Palestinians is exasperating regional tensions. So, too, are suspected Israeli extraterritorial assassinations of militia leaders. Fears are growing the war could spiral into a full-blown conflict in the Middle East, and that has prompted yet another round of high-stakes shuttle diplomacy from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. We've got a couple of our familiar names. We're hoping to connect soon with Arif Lalani, who previously served as Canadian ambassador to the UAE, Jordan, and Iraq. But here with me in studio, Juneau, previously served as Middle East analyst for the Canadian Defense Department. He is now an associate professor at the University of Ottawa. Tomas, it's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Let's start from the big picture, from your vantage point. Antony Blinken, who always seems to be somewhere close to Israel these days. What's at stake right now during this particular trip to the Middle East?
Well, there's a very deep historical tradition now going back to the 1970s of shuttle diplomacy by American secretaries of state when there's a crisis in the Middle East. So we're really seeing the continuity of that. You know, on the one hand, Blinken has been very clear that one of his priorities is to avoid regional escalation, and that's a very legitimate concern because the situation is so volatile that is certainly a risk. That being said, and I don't want to sound optimistic in any way because I'm not. I mean, from a humanitarian perspective, from a security perspective, it's
right.
A tragedy. But I've been of the view now since fairly early in the war that the risk of a regional escalation, i.e. Hezbollah diving fully into the war, other pro-Iran groups in the region in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere fully attacking Israel, not the limited attacks that we're seeing now, but fully attacking Israel. The risks of that are fairly low. I mean, Hezbollah has been, if anything, surprisingly transparent in saying that it does not want a full-scale war with Israel. And Iran has basically said the same thing, and there's a number of media reports that Iran has said that in private to the United States too.
Right.
The risk now is that given what I think is a reality of Hezbollah not wanting this full-scale escalation, is that Israel understands this and wants to push the envelope and says, okay, because Hezbollah doesn't want escalation, how much more can we do to pressure Hezbollah, to hit Hezbollah in Lebanon, to target its leaders, to target Hamas leaders inside Lebanon without provoking a full-scale retaliation by Hezbollah? So that's the delicate balance that we're in right now.
So is that the dynamic you see playing out? Because there was a widely believed to be done by Israel assassination
Yes.
or killing of Hamas leadership in Beirut. Today, Hezbollah commander was confirmed to have been killed by Israel, and Israel says it did it. So, there's suddenly an increasing body count on the Lebanon side of the border of people of importance to these Iranian-backed militias. I mean, how close do you think that brings things to escalating?
It brings it close because Israel is basically calling Hezbollah's bluff, is basically playing a bit of a game of chicken with Hezbollah here. There's always been rules of the game between Israel and Hezbollah, not written overt rules, but more or less tacit understandings between Israel and Hezbollah. These understandings have evolved over the years according to the situation after the 2006 war.
Right.
They've been interpreted differently, but they've always understood what not to do to provoke the other towards a full-scale war, kind of red lines that the other one has. Now, Hezbollah has said that it doesn't want escalation, so Israel is basically playing on that to try to change the rules of the game in its favor by assassinating Hezbollah leaders, by targeting Hezbollah military infrastructure in southern Lebanon, for example, to try to push back Hezbollah as far as possible from the Israeli border between
right.
the two.
Great
I've been on that border between Israel and Lebanon just over a year ago, and you can see literally from across the fence Hezbollah bunkers and Hezbollah military sites, and Israel has always said that it wants to push these back. So there's an effort at this level of Israel saying, how much can we do beyond the current rules of the game to try to push back these rules?
Okay, we are joined now by Arif Lalani, who previously served as a Canadian ambassador to the UAE, Jordan, and Iraq, now a senior advisor at Strategy Corp. Arif, thanks for joining us. We're glad you're patient and we were able to connect. I just wanted, get your take on Antony Blinken and his visit to his constant visits to the region. How would you evaluate the influence right now of the United States in the Middle East? The U.S. insists it doesn't want this conflict to widen, but can that prove influential right now?
Thanks. Look, I think the challenge right now is that the Americans are really firefighting. You're right, Secretary Blinken is there week after week for 2 months, but one has to ask oneself, what is he really pitching? There isn't really a strategy or a vision or a political framework or a peace process. He is there every week trying to fight the fire that has just erupted, the days before he's there. So I am concerned that the United States and others have to come up with a plan and a vision to try and contain this conflict, because otherwise we are going to see day after day a real risk of this escalating beyond Gaza and certainly to Lebanon and then I think involving Iran.
On Iran, the killing of a Hezbollah commander, Israel accused of killing Hamas leadership's members in Beirut, inside Lebanon, the activity of the Houthis. I mean, do you think what Israel is doing here, Tomas has suggested that maybe Hezbollah's desire not to have this widen into a full war has emboldened Israel to maybe push the envelope a little bit. How do you view what's been happening there on the Israeli-Lebanon side of things?
Well, look, what concerns me, again, is that there doesn't seem to be a strategy on either side. It's not clear after over 2 months of a military operation in Gaza how Israelis will be more secure. It's not clear to me yet how expanding this conflict to Hamas and Hezbollah and Lebanon is going to make Israelis more secure. There needs to be a political framework. And I think the challenge here is normally in the past, when we've had these conflicts, the Americans, usually with another partner, has brought forward some kind of a peace plan to try and contain things. The challenge is the current Israeli government, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has made it clear that he has no interest in a two-state solution. In which case, what is really on the table? What can the Americans, what can anybody else put on the table to bring parties to some kind of a discussion beyond this conflict?
Tomas, Arif points something that is very problematic in terms of a day after Gaza strategy, but whatever the day after Gaza looks like, Israel's sort of indicating that they're moving to a new, less invasive phase, of its invasion of Gaza, the fewer ground troops, fewer airstrikes. What does this development do to tensions in the region?
Not much for now, in the sense that what we are likely to see, at least for the first few months of 2024, is a slow, steady but slow decrease in the intensity of Israeli operations. It was announced at the end of December, for example, that Israel would demobilize thousands of reservists who've been involved in operations or around Gaza. That's probably necessary, if only for economic reasons, because mobilizing so many reservists in a fairly small country has been very costly economically, socially. But this new phase that you refer to is a steady downgrade, not a sudden withdrawal or anything like that. We're probably going to see more and more of that over the months, not weeks, not days, because for now, Israel remains quite far from achieving its objective. There's been a bit more clarity on its objective, which is to dismantle Hamas's military capabilities and degrade as much as possible its ability to govern Gaza. Hamas has clearly been weakened, but we are not, and probably not very close to where the point that Israel has in mind. So from Israel's perspective, these operations have to continue, even if on a slightly lesser scale. And for now, politically, domestically inside Israel, the support is there. Netanyahu is very contested. He's very unpopular. He's doing very badly in the polls. But support for military operations in Gaza remains quite strong. So there's little reason to think that, at least in the short midterm, it's going to do more than slightly decrease.
So, Arif, going back to your point about what you see as a lack of strategy, sort of on both sides, like 4 months into this, or it's not clear how Israel is any more safe. It's not clear, what the end of this looks like. And you see some comments from the more hardline members of the Israeli government, essentially saying ethnic cleansing of that region, forcing all the Palestinians out of Gaza, is the solution here. Is there a path to this being over soon? Because it seems like this is just going to continue in the background for a long time right now.
Well, I fear in the absence of some clarity of what the Israeli government wants, I think we will see a conflict that continues. And I fear that that's actually, continuing insecurity for Israelis. So I think the real question is, if the current Israeli government does not favor a two-state solution, what does it favor? And at the moment, it seems to me that Israel is going to end up occupying Gaza and is going to have a real challenge on its hands. And it also seems to me that at the moment, the United States is kind of owning this as a global power. It seems to have no other global partner. And as you're seeing, I think it's having a very tough time managing this in the absence of some other countries who have influence over not just Israel, but over Iran as well.
Yeah, and Tomaj, that's a difficult spot for the U.S. president, given the election season in the United States is going to escalate quite rapidly. I mean, just what are you watching for? How do you think this can potentially get resolved in the near term? Can it?
I think there's a lot of things to watch in the next few years at the regional level, Iran's role and so on. One aspect, and not the only one or not necessarily the most important one, but one aspect to watch is the evolution of debates inside Israel on what to do, what you call the day after. The war is not going to stop one day with a clear day after that, but as the situation evolves and as the issue of governing Gaza, which basically is ungoverned right now, will have to emerge. Who governs Gaza? Is it a Palestinian coalition? The question that is very difficult to address, does that coalition have to include remnants of more moderate elements of Hamas after this happens? Will there be a multinational force? Will there be settlements? I mean, as you said, there are elements inside the Israeli coalition that are openly advocating for the mass displacement of Palestinians and for new settlements inside Gaza. These debates are not resolved, so there's not a clear position by the Israeli government now. How these debates evolve in the next few months will be essential, including whether the government itself survives. And if a new government comes in with a new coalition, with a balance of power inside Israel changing, will that lead to a new position on post-war governance in Gaza?
So, Arif, just last word to you. I mean, what are you watching for in the next couple of weeks, next month or so?
I'm really watching, as Thomas says, what the political mood is inside Israel, because I think there is a decision here for Israelis to make. And second, really for the Americans and other countries to come up with some proposition of a political framework. The Egyptians floated a proposal. The Americans need to do that. And second, I think they need a partner. You remember in 1990, when we started a round of the Middle East peace process after the Iraq War, the Soviet Union co-sponsored it. Now, the Soviet Union was a competitor, but we found common cause. And the reason I'm saying that is it seems to me that the only other partner here is China, with whom there is a great rivalry and competition, but also it's a country that can exert influence in the region and try and help the Americans to manage this.
Gentlemen, I always appreciate your insights and your time. Thank you so much, Arif Lalani and Thomas Juneau.
Thank you.